and welcome to the Birchal Podcast. My name is Emily. I'm your host, and today I'm joined by Peter Leeson, who is the founder of Volt Solar Tile, which is a company that is blending renewable energy with sleek design. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
I'd love to hear a little bit about how you founded Volt Solar Tile. Where did it come from, the idea, and what made you think traditional solar panels on roofs aren't enough?
Great question. So I'm an electrician by trade. I've been running business for 20 years, and in 2008 we entered into renewable. So solar rooftop, that's when the industry was booming. And we started doing the rooftop solar and then looked at different opportunities, started doing more commercial, and then fully became dedicated to just doing solar power. The building integrated PV industry was quite an interesting one. So it was this topic that people always thought would happen, and there was some opportunity there, but it was also always an architectural product, not so much a mainstream type of product. So we started consulting into the industry, looking at different products, doing some installations along with doing the commercial and residential rooftop solar. Then we decided to start designing a product. It was a bit more of a hobby for me. So I could do 3D design through my work that I'd done in the building industry, designing homes and developing some homes. And ultimately just did it as a weekend thing and just a bit of an interest. Then slowly started to move towards consulting into the building integrated PV industry, more heavily doing designs. Then about 5 years ago, we decided to heavily invest in the business, incorporate our own entity, and then really take something to the market. So it's been 10 years of design of a product, 5 years of business investment to understand, what market is there, what the opportunities are. And it's so broad, the solar market, the roofing market, and then specifically the solar tile market. So we've worked with a lot of big organisations, Brickworks Groups, Bristol Roofing Australia, Lascandé based in Spain. We've looked at roofs, we've worked with their organisations closely about compliance and ease of installation, accessibility to buildings, and all these sort of different aspects that go into the design. We've taken all that data back to the design of the product, the design principles of the product, to integrate a solar panel into a roof rather than try to recreate a whole new roofing system.
Okay. So at this stage, are you just servicing residential properties or commercial properties as well?
So predominantly our market is residential new home or renovation re-roof. So if you're doing a renovation and you're re-roofing your home or you're building a new home, it fits within the installation of a new roof. From a commercial perspective, it's more government or not-for-profit organisations that have larger commercial buildings that may have roof tiles on them. So primarily we are a roof tile and we integrate into an existing roof tile system. So we just lay down like a roof tile. The commercial buildings that you would see are going to be more the heritage listed. There's not a lot of commercial buildings that you will see that will have roof tiles on them. So you're talking, maximum 2 to 3 story buildings with large roof spaces, schools, churches, maybe some older hospitals, government buildings, this sort of stuff that would be a commercial side. Or then you've got, larger developments, which you could slightly consider commercial use.
Okay, right. So how would you compare the price point of your product versus a traditional solar panel that you might see on a roof?
Yep, so there's a couple of different things you need to consider when you're talking about pricing. So if you benchmark solar tiles with a standard solar panel system that they can, low-end products, cheap inverter, cheap panels, then you've got the premium end of the market, which is more of your SunPower Enphase type systems. So doing a price comparison there, we're roughly the same price as your premium product, maybe slightly more, but we're about double the price in terms of the solar component of a standard solar panel system, dollar per watt type thing. 5 kilowatt system costs $5,000. But ultimately we're a roofing product. So when you consider the cost of a roof, let's say you're doing a re-roof on a 220 square metre home, that's going to cost you roughly about $25,000 for your standard flat concrete roof tile. If you're adding solar onto that, the system's going to cost you $30,000.
Right.
Therefore, we might be $5,000 more than the roof and the solar, but it's only an uptick from $30,000 to $35,000 to have your new roof, your solar tiles installed. Whereas you consider the new home market, we sort of sit within that $500,000-$600,000 plus build price market. So if you're building a new home, you're getting your roof installed anyway. The NCC 2022 compliance in Australia means that pretty much every new home needs to have solar, and I can touch on that in a bit. But ultimately, there's an energy budget component, and you need to meet the energy budget requirements. And if you exceed the energy budget, total cost of energy for that home, you then need to install solar power. And what we're hearing from the builders is that 90% of their homes now need to have solar power on them. So you're already having to put solar in, and you're spending $500,000 or $600,000 on a home. So to spend $5,000 more to have integrated solar, where you've got a beautiful roof and you don't have these obtrusive solar panels sitting there as you drive down your driveway, is really the point of the sale. So the cost increase is not much for the product that we are, which is a solar roof.
So when you're going out to market and looking at your key customers, are you speaking directly to builders or homeowners?
Yep, great question. So it rolls into our broader market strategy, and we are working globally. So we've done installations across France, Spain, Portugal, Turkey, and every state of Australia. And we're looking at doing our US market entry. So we've done an analysis of global countries, and we've identified the primary markets and secondary markets that we want to work within. And that's based off the irradiance levels, cost of electricity, cost of labour, incentives to go with renewables from the government, and then consumer sentiment towards renewable energy. Okay. And we've identified 13 regions globally, and within that we've got primary and secondary markets. So our primary markets are Australia, the US, Spain, Portugal, and Italy. And then our secondary markets sit within a different distribution channel. Our primary market strategy is really to work closely in those regions. And Australia is a prime example where we've proven our business model, in which we partner with solar businesses. So solar businesses are the experts to sell solar, not to sell roofs. Roofing businesses do not know how to sell solar. So when a consumer is looking to get solar power in their home or solar tiles, they're asking questions about which facing roof is going to get the most energy, or energy when I need to consume that energy. As in, a west facing roof generates electricity in the afternoon and evening, and I'm home in the afternoon and evening, so I want to generate and use that electricity. They have questions around, how would I control my EV? How will I charge it? What about a heat pump? What about energy control? What about a battery? What sort of inverter should I buy?
I was just about to ask you that about batteries.
So all of these questions roll in that a roofing business can't answer. And that goes inherently back to a lot of the issues in the industry of roofing and building product organisations trying to enter this space, create a solar tile that for a number of reasons have failed, and then ultimately they can't get to market because they don't have access to that market, because they don't know how to sell solar and they don't have the experts selling solar. So to remove the compound margin effect of not going through a distributor or a roofing business, through a solar business, selling to the builder and then the homeowner, we sell direct to solar companies here in Australia, and that's our direct market strategy. We've got 50 Vault partners around the country, so we cover the entire country with our signed Vault partners, and they're out there selling the solar tiles to builders and homeowners, depending whether it's a renovation, re-roof, a own a build or a build, but they're also working directly with those homeowners to support with the design and all the questions that they have. And then our software actually gets the quote that the solar business is selling for Vault, and it goes into our system and then goes across to the roofer, who then quotes the roof. So it's the solar business managing the solar component because they are the experts. Okay. And then it's the roofing business selling the roof because they are the experts. And where things have failed in the past is solar businesses can't sell roofs and roofing businesses can't sell solar. So we've managed to bring all that together and make it a benefit for all the parties involved.
Right. That's really interesting. And then, so my question around how does the power actually get stored? So you wouldn't be storing them within the roof tiles. So do you need to purchase a separate battery? Yep. And how big would that battery be?
So our system is designed like a standard solar panel. Ultimately, it's just integrated into the roof to improve the aesthetics of the roof and also improve the performance of the roof. So waterproofing of the roof is extremely important. We've got a range of different interlocking mechanisms within our product to provide a fully sealed roof that's actually more waterproof than the roof tile system. So primarily that is what our product does. if you install standard panel system, you would need to lift up the roof tile, flip it over, grind a channel out of that roof tile, put a bracket down, put the roof tile back in. Therefore, you've got a gap, so you've got a point of water ingress into the roof.
Okay.
So you void your roof warranty if you install standard panels on a tile roof. So in terms of energy generation from the system, we act like any standard panel system where it goes down to an inverter. So we create DC electricity, and then the inverter converts it to AC electricity. You can either consume that electricity at the point in time that you generate it. So generally, middle of the day, you're getting the most electricity, or you can export to the grid. If you want to install a battery, you can install a battery and then you'll charge that battery and then discharge it when you come home later on in the day. Other methods of storage, though, are hot water service. So you can get a heat pump hot water, which you can switch on and off from your inverter, or you can just put on a time switch. And a hot water service is just an energy storage device.
Okay.
You're taking the sun's energy from during the day, you're storing that energy in water, and then you're consuming that water when you get home or in the morning the next day. So energy storage is sort of a challenging one around. People understand that there are other ways to store energy other than just batteries. But yeah, we integrate with any battery as per any standard panel system. So we can integrate with a Tesla battery, a SunGrow battery, a Sonnen battery, any of those products whatsoever. The other part of it is that we can also charge into vehicles. So, as technology is improving and the cost of EVs are coming down, generally there might be an EV parked at home during the day, and that's the perfect energy storage device. So it doesn't necessarily mean you need to have a battery. If you've got an EV, you can just make sure that you've got those controls in place to turn your EV on. Example, I drive a Tesla. I can plug that Tesla in during the day, and I have an app on my phone that integrates my solar with my Tesla, and it will just turn the Tesla on to charge when I'm exporting electricity to the grid. And therefore, I don't need to have a home battery. I have no purpose for having a home battery because I'm getting that energy consumption or energy arbitrage to a later point in time when I want to use that vehicle. Right. Where technology is even improving again is we got vehicle to grid technology. So we're waiting for certification of different products, and there's a few trials in South Australia and Victoria for vehicle to grid. But vehicle to grid is where you charge your vehicle during the day from solar, and then you can discharge it back into your home at night time. So it's instead of having a stationary battery, you've got a battery in your vehicle that you can utilize, and you can also drive it around. So you could go to work, you could charge at work, you could bring it home, and you could discharge to your home. So the whole energy space and the electricity networks are evolving, and technology is keeping up or taking the lead, but regulations and standards are what are delaying us from that, real progression. You can go and buy Tesla Powerwall, say, for $15,000 installed. Let's say the cost is that. Or you can go and buy a BYD or for $40,000. So for not much more money, you get a vehicle and also a much larger battery, a 50 kilowatt hour battery as opposed to a 14 kilowatt hour battery.
I'm about to ask you what might be a dumb question.
No dumb question.
But why wouldn't a Tesla have a large solar panel integrated into its roof?
Great question. So there is a vehicle manufacturer in Europe that has tried to make the solar car. And ultimately, solar cells, commercial solar cells is currently sitting about 23.5% efficient. So they're solar cells that you can buy, and commercially they're installed in solar panels. Then once you put that into the solar panel, you've got the solar panel efficiency slightly drops because you've got frames, you've got gaps between all the cells. So efficiency is one of these really important terms that we use in the industry. And efficiency is based off the conversion of the sun's energy to electricity. So say a standard solar panel is 21.5% efficient right now, and our volt solar tile is 19.5%. So we're the most efficient solar tile in the world. The solar panel efficiency of 21%, or let's just use 20% for round numbers, converts the sun's energy into electricity. And standard test conditions that we test solar panels are 1,000 watts per square meter. So there's 1,000 watts per square meter of the sun's energy hitting the earth when we're doing these tests. And if you're converting 20% of the sun's energy, that means it's 1,000 times 0.2. Which is 200 watts per square meter. So you envision you've got a car and you've got all the curves and the vibrations and all those hassles around it. The amount of energy that you're converting might be Yeah, even if you wrap the entire car in solar cells, it might be 500 watts of energy generation.
Okay.
And if you've got a 50 kilowatt hour battery, even you're sitting out in the sun in perfect sunlight, not shaded, and you've got that 1,000 watts per square meter, which you're not going to have. You're only going to get 5 kilowatts over 10 hours of a day. So you're not going to get a lot of energy storage and generation for that conversion to the vehicle because of the amount of space you've got. Where solar panels on vehicles make sense is off-road campers, caravans, these sort of things, where people go camping.
Yeah.
They've got a tiny little battery. They just need a little bit of energy storage to have the LED lights on in the camper or the caravan at night time, run the high-efficiency fridge, whereas the network and the availability of electricity is everywhere. We've got this huge asset in Australia, which is this amazingly large electricity network. So we're better off just generating electricity at the point where we park, plugging in and charging from that.
Okay. That was the most electrician answer I could have asked for.
I'm way too technical. My apologies.
I felt like I was that meme where it was just all the equations going off around my head and I was like, what is happening? In a good way. It's nice for me to actually learn about this stuff and I love it. So my dad actually has always been in electrical conservation and he's on the board for electrical conservation in Australia.
Wow.
So I have to hear about this stuff all the time. He's an electrical engineer. So you can't get him to shut up about climate change and all of these things. I remember being younger and saying, isn't climate change good? We get nice hot summers. This is going to be great. It's like, you don't get it. Mm-hmm. And I think that in Australia, it's interesting because there's this huge juxtaposition between us being, energy efficient and using renewable energy sources versus us creating and exporting fossil fuels.
Yep.
How do we find that balance? And, there's a lot of regions that rely on these fossil fuels to run. Why is that? Why are we this country of such contradiction?
So, you can go back and look at news articles from the 50s on climate change and global warming and carbon in the atmosphere. This is not something new, but awareness through media, social media now is becoming more common. We're becoming so much more educated. We've got the access to information so easy. So the drive towards everyone's concern and anxiety around global warming is just increasing massively. But we've got an industry, we've got regions and communities that survive off exporting coal or even exporting iron ore or exporting other products that have a huge amount of electricity demand for power, which needs to come from coal. Because ultimately we don't have a current other way to generate that electricity. We didn't have the foresight 20 years ago or the information or 30 years ago to start this transition. And so that's been a key critical issue of awareness and change. And we can't just drop those coal-fired generators. We can't just take them out of the network because everything will crumble. And so we need to manage an orderly transition, but we need political alignment. We need social and political alignment around what we're doing, whether it's utility scale solar farms, which is a space I also work in, or it's rooftop solar. And we're really started to get that traction now over the last 3 to 4 years. And we're improving the electricity network so that we can absorb these high levels of renewables penetration in the middle of the day at certain points of time, and then just smooth that out and then shift that energy through batteries, energy arbitrage, pumped hydro, this sort of stuff. So it is a contrast, but we can't stop the economy for the principle of, okay, global warming's happening. We just need to move quicker. Yeah. We've got to have better policy, better alignment, better corporate social responsibility from investment to make sure that we're not investing in new carbon emitting technologies or, and that's starting to happen. We're seeing exits of investors from, carbon emitting organisations, whether it's coal-fired generation, mining and exports and this sort of stuff. But it's going to take time. And that's our biggest barrier because we're now seeing the effects of global warming. We're seeing these huge climate events that happen in an instant, whether it's, extreme storms or it's extremely hot summers or it's extremely wet summers. And it's just no one sort of really understands what's actually going to happen. As much as the scientists have done all the analysis, it's still up in the air how quickly this is going to happen and what that impact's going to be. So whilst we've got to drive renewables and consumers can have their input by considering a environmentally sustainable transport solution through EVs that have ethical supply chains, have a longer life period. We don't want to just be buying cheap electric cars that are going to have to be replaced in 5 years. We want to be buying electric cars that are going to last 15 years, 10 to 15 years, because ultimately that environmental impact, although it might not be as carbon emitting, it's still not a good impact to be, digging up in mines and then, converting this to batteries that we're still working out to how to recycle. So it's got to be a very sustainable and well thought out approach, and policy and social is all trying to catch up in one head.
It's an interesting thing because we work with a lot of environmental and sustainable companies at Birchal, and seeing the comments that get left on our social media posts is kind of scary but interesting to understand the different perspectives of different people. So one business that we had recently was Clever Cow, and essentially it's putting a chemical into the feed
yep.
so that the methane emissions are lessened when a cow burps. So it's not actually the farts. I thought it was the farts, but it's the burps.
Yep.
And then I was seeing people post saying, well, farmers are going to have to pay for this. Where's the government subsidising that extra money that the farmers are going to have to spend to reduce these emissions? And then people commenting saying, well, hang on. If we eat these cows, is this going to affect us as humans? And are we going to get sick from these chemicals? And you just can't make anybody happy. I think that's the really tricky part of it. And everybody always brings it back to the financial effects, the cost of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the huge discussion that people are trying to have, is people are saying, well, if climate change keeps going the way it's going, we're not going to have a country that we're going to be worrying about the economy for, because we'll all be dead.
Yep.
So it's a scary thing. It's like, how do you juggle it? Where does it balance out?
And I guess the question on that is, the access to information and why these people, there's so much access to information now. So everyone's thinking about different points. It's like, well, are you eating GMO food? Right now, what happens if you do eat this? Should you not be eating meat? Do we stop eating meat to stop these emissions? But ultimately, well, where are you going to get? You can't feed everyone, so it's there's all these sort of different questions to roll into that. And I think ultimately, the innovation is coming from driven, smart people. In terms of, we're going to have a new feedstock that's going to reduce emissions, and these are brilliant concepts to solve a problem. And I say this all the time. We've got this society of young people who want to be entrepreneurs, but they don't know how to solve problems. They need to go out there, they need to be motivated and driven, and they need to work for organisations and learn and grow, and then they need to come in and solve problems. And someone who creates a product that reduces methane emissions through feedstock and cows, they're solving a big problem. And we now need to get the buy-in of government to support that in policy, and the community to see the drive. And if they need more money for testing and compliance and growth, that's where we need a society like the US, where we've got that investment accessibility for these businesses who are creating these brilliant ideas and can create a global product. I mean, if you can launch something like that, and I've never done an analysis of the market, of what other countries have these products, but what a great product that you could implement here in Australia and then export around the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are so many of these businesses that are taking on these challenges. But as someone who solves problems and starts businesses, it's not easy. It's a hard slog. It's a fight. We're 100% privately held, our business. We've never raised money, and we're taking on the global market. We're looking to take on Tesla in the US. We're about to do our US market entry. And those barriers, it's sheer blood, sweat and tears by myself, my business partners and our team to drive into those markets and achieve what needed to be done. Where you get, we don't get as similar products, generally we get, wow, this looks beautiful, we didn't know it was available. But you do get the haters, you get the people that say, well, what about this, what about that, why would you do this if you can't do that? And everyone's going to have an opinion on that, but ultimately without great ideas to solve problems and money to back that, we don't have change. And this is what I love about crowdsourced funding, because it puts it in the hands of the people. Those people that believe in these solutions, they're the ones that will drive this. And and it gives individuals the opportunity to come on a journey with organisations and be part, a shareholder in these startups, which they wouldn't have had access to do before. It was all done through VC, before they IPO.
And not even that. I mean, you're getting these shareholders on who will essentially become ambassadors for the product. And you're doing a marketing campaign for a product that a lot of people didn't know existed. I didn't know that there were these beautiful solar tiles that could exist for roofs instead of these massive, ugly eyesores that you traditionally see on them. And I think that that's the beauty of equity crowdfunding as well, is that you're spreading this message to a lot of people who might not know about it previously. But I do get so infuriated when I see the comments. There's always somebody hating on some idea for one reason or another. What's the feedback that you get? How could somebody have something negative to say?
Oh, I mean, we don't really get negative feedback, to be honest. You always get, people say this doesn't work or the strategy is defunct. And, even to the point, I entered renewables in 2008 and I used to go and meet with homeowners and they'd say, is this real? Does this actually generate electricity or is this just a scam? And so if you think about in the last 16 years, how far we've come, that we've got per capita the highest rooftop penetration in the world, which is absolutely amazing. We've got, I think it's like 4 million rooftop systems, of 8.5, 9 million homes, semi-detached dwellings in Australia. If you look at that compared to the US have 5 million rooftop installations.
What?
That's it, 5 million. So
how is that
massive
possible?
contrast, whereas the US are building nearly 1 million housing starts per year of semi-detached dwellings. We do 130,000. California does 120,000 new housing starts, semi-detached dwellings every single year. Australia does 130,000 in total.
That's insane.
Housing starts. So just the contrast, hence why we do have this big strategy towards the US. But when you talk about these comments, I'm a big believer that, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, in the media, sex sells, right? Buy a Porsche, you'll be attractive, this sort of thing. But what sells now, what ties people in is division. And what social media, TikTok, Facebook, these sort of things are targeting is division. So it's division between people. It's the contrast of, Trump versus Harris. And how do we create division? Because that creates clicks, that creates influence. And the algorithms they use scale up those posts. If a post isn't creating that division, that attention, then it might get 1,000 views. Whereas a post on TikTok that is creating that division through the algorithms that's identifying that's getting 5 million views. And so realistically, these comments that you see about these products and different technologies, it's about division. It's about a difference of opinion and people wanting to have that division. And that's why, the recent US election was US elections have always been big in the Australian media, but this one is it's getting bigger and bigger. Whereas my problem that I have is we don't hear or see in social media about our elections, about our state-led council elections, our local council elections, our state and our federal elections. And you've got smaller attention on that, and that actually impacts us. Whereas the US election could affect our economy based off, the policies that will be implemented, but it's going to have very little effect on other areas for us in Australia. So it's, a lot of this is driven by division. And I think a lot of the comments that you do get, those negative comments, it's just keyboard warriors trying to create that and have a say when it's really just uneducated opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly, I found that there was a bit of a lack of rhetoric around climate change when the US election was on. You weren't hearing a lot about climate policy over in the States. You were hearing about a lot of horrible political decisions. And I think that really took center stage. What is their stance on climate change, and why do you think that you'd be able to enter into that market in a successful and meaningful way?
Yep. So the US is a fascinating beast, and there's so much information, but at a super high level, the Biden administration, or very pro-renewables, has implemented a lot of policy around manufacturing in the US, and also the sovereignty of that manufacturing supply chain and tariffs. And they've done that by financial incentives and then tariffs on Chinese-made solar panels, which are 99% of the world's solar modules. Whereas Trump is probably more against renewables. You know, he's saying we're going to drill, baby, drill, you know, like as in drill more oil, use more coal.
Do I look afraid?
Well,
I am a bit.
I think people are afraid, but I think the thing about Trump is, again, he's won an election based off division.
Yeah.
And he's done it really, really well. He's looked at the division. He's looked at who the voters are that aren't voting, and and of those voters who has the problems. And he's created that division, and therefore he's won it. And he's looked at social media, and he's seen what works, and that's division. And that's, I believe, why he's won this election, because he's run a really strong campaign. But the US has the Inflation Reduction Act, and on solar panels, they've got the non-circumvent anti-dumping that has come in with huge tariffs on Chinese solar modules. They then also have production credits of 4.7 US cents per watt. So if you make a solar panel in the US, you get a 4.7 cent production credit US to reduce that cost.
Okay.
And then you've got these huge tariffs on Chinese solar modules. Now, Biden didn't reduce the tariffs that Trump put in his last 4 years. So some of these policies have actually worked really well for the US, and it's very hard to manufacture solar modules in any country other than China if you don't have a supply chain. So you need to build a supply chain from ingots to wafers to cells, glass, TPT, EVAs, backsheets, junction boxes, framing, the whole works. And then you need to have the process of manufacturing those solar modules. So you need that supply chain, and without having the incentives around that, you can't do that. So the production credits under the Inflation Reduction Act and tariffs are really helping the US build a supply chain there, but it's still very difficult. And then you've got the income tax credits on products as well. So in the US, financing of solar systems is way more common than actually buying it up front. So let's say an average price of a solar power system on a home is $20,000 in the US for 8 kilowatts, that is. So if you buy that system, you can get an income tax credit of 30%.
Wow.
So what happens is there are a lot of funds that do these under leasing or PPA arrangements. So the fund owns the solar power system, and then they get that income tax credit. So basically they get 30% down. If you have an over a certain percentage amount of US made product on that system, they're now talking about increasing that to 40%. Now let's just see what happens in the new administration. We're not sure if that happens. So the US has some solid policy around removing that sovereign risk with manufacturing of solar and having the solar. Because if China turned off manufacturing tomorrow, the world, the climate change, we're screwed. It's a disaster.
Yeah.
So people can be against China and what they did in terms of dumping solar modules around the world at a lower price 10 years ago to wipe out all the global manufacturing and then take control of it. But ultimately that's happened, and it's kind of happened again with this huge amount of manufacturing capacity that they have and this massive drop in the cost of solar modules.
Okay.
But they are losing money. Some of the largest, one of the largest Chinese solar module manufacturers first calendar half.
Why is that?
This year lost nearly $1 billion. So what basically happened was they have set up a huge amount of manufacturing capacity, and there's oversupply. So they drop their prices, hence why they're losing money. There's also changes in different policies around the world. The US was a big one in the non-circumvent anti-dumping. What they brought in was they removed 4 Southeast Asian countries from being able to get around the tariffs on China. So what happened, the Chinese manufacturing had set up plants all throughout Southeast Asia to import into the US to get around those tariffs. And then the US has become aware of this, and they've just cut out the manufacturing, which unlocked 37 gigawatts of manufacturing capacity that could no longer go to the US. So if you consider that we're a 6 gigawatt market, 6 to 7 gigawatt market per year of solar in Australia, which is split roughly 50% between utility scale and, residential, commercial, rooftop solar, that's a six-fold increase on our our national requirements for solar panels, which has just been cut out. So those manufacturing plants need to look somewhere to ship their product and then shut down their plants.
So why would they do that? Why are they saying no to these Chinese products?
So they're trying to set up their own. There's probably two things. There's the ethical supply chain, which is a big issue in China, particularly around the mining of the silicon.
Okay.
Heavy metals and mining of silicon in China do have the Uyghurs, the slave labour, and it's pretty bad. So there's a lot of studies being done, but it's very hard to identify a product that doesn't have slave labour in the supply chain and prove that, because you've got to go right through the supply chain.
Yeah,
so that's a big part of the US, which is an incredible step that they've taken. But ultimately, I believe it's come down to financial. They're trying to keep America's economy strong by having local manufacturing. They're also trying to remove sovereign risk. There's the Chinese-Taiwan risk and this sort of stuff as well.
Right.
But ultimately, it's the world's greatest economy, and they're trying to grow that. The startup, the Silicon Valley, is huge. I think I read the other day that NVIDIA's market cap is larger than the entire German stock exchange value.
What?
So, it's insane, and people forget what the US economy does for the world. But the US has actually reduced the amount of products they import over the last 4 or 5 years from China. And so this is happening both through local manufacturing and then changes post-COVID, buying online, this sort of stuff. So, I think that it really is more of a financial decision, and removing that sovereign risk and having their local manufacturing, which is hard because it's so far into the commercialization and scale of this technology when you've got hundreds of gigawatts of manufacturing in China, and then the US had pretty much zero, and they're trying to fight against that, and they've got to have a number of different policies to be that, through tariffs, production credits, incentives, state government. So the state governments around there are amazing in terms of the support for manufacturing, and particularly around renewables, because it's all about jobs.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that you've got this argument is so tricky to kind of balance. You've got trying to support local jobs. You're trying to encourage people utilizing renewable energy systems. You're also trying to fund the economy of your country. It's like, which one comes first at this point? It's so hard.
Yeah. And, there's the conversation around taking on debt and those use of funds. And, you could criticize any government around the world for misuse of funds. The governments are not the most commercial organisation when it comes to spending, because they've got risk. So they need to mitigate risk by having a large number of people doing a lot of analysis to make sure they get in on their next 4-year term.
Yeah.
So, should we be spending money in different areas? Should we be spending money on innovation and startups? Should we be spending money on keeping coal alive and exports? But, the government makes a lot of money from exports, so they're not going to shut that down. Iron ores, the iron ore price goes up. That's the reason we didn't go into a deficit in the previous financial year, because the iron ore price was so good. So, I think it's really about how do you best spend that money. And the US obviously have brought in, Elon Musk. Trump has brought in Elon Musk for this efficiency in the government and this sort of stuff. So it's really about being wise about where to spend that money, but also making sure you've got a strong economy. You're not going into too much debt. Obviously, Victoria post-COVID, our debt is off the charts. And so how do you manage that debt? And that's not a today problem. That's our kids' problem, because they're the ones that are going to be paying that debt back. It's not us. That debt will get to a certain level where we need to try and wipe it out. And that's what's happening in the US with the debt they're taking on. It's not this generation's wealthy that's paying for it. It's the next generation. And so, we need to be very mindful about that future spending, but we need to move quickly. So there's so many challenges, and this, conversation's got so much about politics and spending, which I love the thought process because it's where it all originates. But ultimately, like, for example, if you look at a residential battery in a home or a residential vehicle that could, say, charge and discharge, there's a couple of different things that can happen. The utilisation rate of a battery on a home is quite low, whereas we develop in one of the businesses we've worked in previously or currently, but a separate business to this is we've developed utility scale batteries. So big batteries and the utilisation rate needs to be high because we, might spend 10, 20, 30, $50 million on the construction of a battery, development of the project, and you want to utilise that battery because it's got to get as high level return as possible. Whereas the consumer makes an emotional decision. The consumer says, I want a battery because my electricity, I got solar, my electricity bills are still high. I'm exporting all this electricity to the grid for 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And if I get a battery, the life of it's 10 years, I'm going to live here for the next 10 years and I'm going to use that electricity and then I get back up on all these other features. But the utilisation rate's low. They'll charge it during the day, they'll come home, they might cycle it half a cycle a day to 0.8 of a cycle a day. Whereas a utility scale battery, you want to be cycling that battery 1.5 times. So that's charge, discharge. So charge and discharge is one full cycle. So that utilisation of that, battery on the utility scale is really, really high. By us incentivising consumers to get batteries is great. And it's a great step because consumers paying for it. It goes under their mortgage. It's low cost finance. That they get the benefits of the solar, and they've made a decision to go renewables. What we need to encourage though is that improvement in technology. How about we have better VPPs? So we really promote the VPPs so we can get higher utilisation rate of those batteries. So we have less batteries connecting to the network. And if we have less batteries connecting to the network, we've got less manufacturing of batteries, which means we've got less environmental impact.
Right.
Because anything that we consume has an environmental impact as a life, that we need to take that back and we need to recycle it. So policy around these things, getting really smart people in government is what we need to do and really smart people in organisations like the Clean Energy Council, the Smart Energy Council, and all these other great organisations out there to drive changes in policy. So if you've got an electric vehicle, right, that you can park at home and discharge into your home and you can charge during the day, and that's a mobile battery that you can utilise, and it means you don't need to buy that stationary battery. Not only are we doing this energy transition at a lower cost, we're doing it at a lower environmental impact, which is really something that needs to be considered in the advancement of technology and not getting caught up in policy and standard changes.
Yeah, right. I feel like I could talk to you all day about this, and I feel like I've learned so much, and I think it's really opened up a conversation probably for a lot of people that they might not have considered, and particularly for myself, I think I get really caught up in the, I think there's this tear between people wanting different things, the economic value, but then also you're thinking about the environment at the same time. So I'm going to try to wind this up because I swear to God I could talk all day. But thank you so, so much for coming in to chat to me and kind of shedding this light on a lot that I didn't know and hopefully that a lot of people don't know. And I'm so excited to see how Volt Solar Tile performs in the future. I think it's an incredible product and something that will change a lot of people's lives. So thanks so much.
It's great to come in. Really good talking.